Okay, so this is an introduction to new version of SceneWorker version 2 and the first alpha, which is being released now for Ardor 3D. So the first thing to do is to go to code.google.com/p/sceneworker, and in the downloads you'll see that the build is there to download. So go ahead and download that and you'll end up with the zip file. So when you unzip that file, you have a couple of directories created and you have a launcher jar. So go ahead and launch the launcher jar by just clicking on it. So it'll come up with the Ardor 3D settings dialog. So set it to whatever you want. If you do select full screen, it will be ignored. So the scene starts up. So let's quickly give an introduction to SceneWorker and how it all fits together. So here we have our Ardor 3D scene. And controls are basically right click and drag will rotate about the scene, left click and drag will pan, and mouse wheel in and out will zoom in and out. So SceneWorker is made up of three user interface components. The first is a tree representation of the scene graph, which we have here, which is currently just very straightforward. So we have objects in here like spatials, nodes, render states. Certain render states have extra children. The next thing that we have is a properties user interface component. So depending on what we select from our scene tree, this properties will reflect that. And finally, we have a menu here that deals with preferences and tools and help, for example, etc. Okay, so let's get started by creating a pretty simple example. So let's create a new node. So we select root node and create a new node, and let's name this guy test node. So let's add two primitives to this. Let's first add a box, and secondly, let's add a sphere. Add sphere. Okay, so now we see that the sphere is larger than the box, so obviously it's occluding the box. But in SceneWorker we have a way of looking at only the selected item. So preferences, we can select the spatial only. So it'll flick between whatever we've selected in the tree. So we don't really need that for the time being, but it is useful for large scenes if you're trying to find what you've got selected in the tree. So for the time being, let's just take our box and let's just move them up. So to do translations or anything with the sliders, you can literally just move it up like this. Oh, I'm on sphere. So let's just move them up. So there's three different ways you can just click and move. You can hold shift to get better precision, that's 0.1 precision, or else you can hold shift, and I'm on a Mac here, so it's the Alt key. I'm not too sure what it is in Windows, but this will give you unit, move it up and down by units of 100. So let's just put that up at 30 for time being. Okay, so let's create render states. So the first state a render state we'll create is a material state. And we'll add that to the box, and let's just color that material state. Oops. And we'll make this red. We shift all these guys down, or to whatever color we want, and let's just leave the diffuse component as red. Now we've set up our material state, so if we want to share that material state, we can just basically select that material, select copy across to the other render or to the other spatial, and now our material is shared between the two, so that if we change this, oops, up, our edits are reflected across both spatials. So this is useful if you set up a material state and you want to share that between numbers of different spatials rather than going in and creating a material state and constantly editing its properties. This allows you to just copy a reference to the original material state. You can also copy by data, which will create a clone, but by basically selecting and go copy as data, but I'm not covering that here at the moment. So the only other thing I'm going to have a look at, oh well, let's have a look at bounds. So our sphere here has a, we can see the bounding type is a box, but we can change that to sphere, our box, and we get different types of bounds based on that. For example, on the box, if we change this to sphere, we'll see that our bounds is different, but we'll just leave it at box at the moment. If we want to inspect the bounds of children with reference to parents, we can go into the debug menu and go show selected item in children bounds, and that shows us a hierarchy of bounds. So for example, if we go up the root node, you'll see the same. So let's, what will we do now? Let's just add a texture to something. So there's 3 different ways you can add a texture. You can either go ahead and create the render state or the texture state and then add a texture to that texture state, or you can use a utility mechanism here, which is load texture. Or now, because SceneWorker version 2 supports drag and drop in the tree, you can go off and just drag the texture onto the spatial that you want to add it to. So let's just move it up and we drag it onto box. If we click on box here, and we can see that our texture has been added to that box. So let's just go ahead and remove the material so we can delete that. And then we can have a look at this texture state. Now it has a mechanism that allows you to edit this. So if we put up our texture to 2 and texture to 2, there we have a scale. We have a number of different ways of doing the scaling. So there's a couple of different things you can play around with there. So finally, let's just go ahead and save out our state. So we can do that by saving to file. And let's just create a new folder. I'll call this test node. And we'll open this guy and we'll save it as test node.a Ardor 3D, A3D. So we save that up, and that's all saved. So we can go ahead and delete this from our scene. Delete. And then finally just re-import it by selecting import A3D, test node.a3d, and voila, there we have our scene backloaded. So that's just some of the features of SceneWorker version 2 for Ardor 3D. And there's a number of different options and a number of things to play around with. And obviously this feature set will keep increasing with the number of builds that are coming out over the next couple of months, hopefully. So any problems, just give me an email, and my email address is in the about box. So that's it.